Hi, thank you for joining me in my craft room today. This video, we are going to expand a little bit on the one stamp set, one color, and we're going to use, it's not going to be as much stamping, more paper, and we're going to use the Hope and Prayer again so we can have another design that we could use with the stamp set. So I'm going to turn this around and get to my table, and then we'll get to creating this card. Okay, so we're going to do some stenciling, and this is an older stencil. This is not available anymore, but within the catalog, um, they do have another stencil set on page 128 of the catalog, and there is, it's called an Artistic Mix Decorative Mask. And there are some different patterns on there, and they would be lovely for this card as well. We will also be using the 6x6 Designer Series paper assortment. So we'll be using the older ones that I have, but these are the newer patterns on page 135. And then, of course, the Hope and Prayer stamp set here. That's on page 71. So the color that I'm choosing to use today is Coastal Cabana. And what I want to do is the pieces, okay, so the pieces you're going to need is you're going to need a card base. This is 8.5 by 5.25. No, I'm sorry, 8.5 by 5.5 and scored at the 4.25 mark. So we're going to go ahead and fold that card base here. Kind of just get that down. And I've already kind of prepared the mask because I've been playing and making some designs. I'm just going to poke that in there. Have some paper behind it because it's going to get just a tiny bit messy. And I'm just using some washi tape to hold this in place, and it kind of helps hold my card. You'll also need a small piece that measures 4.25 by 3, and then you'll need your 4 by 5.25 piece for the inside. You'll also need your pieces here. I cut these Designer Series pieces in 3/4 inch strips and then cut them down to 2.5. And we're going to kind of take from, I don't know where it's at in the catalog, but there's kind of like this wonky piece design element that you can do to a card. I will get a sample and show you. We did this with a tea suite, so it's just kind of a wonky piece, and this is where I kind of got my inspiration. So we're going to use some of that design element for the card, and you will need 4 pieces, so you have 4 different patterns. And then you'll need a piece for this specific one. If you're going to follow this design, this piece was 3 inches by 3 inches long by 1 inch wide, so it would fit in here to be cut into this this punch that gives this decorative edge. You could also cut and flag it yourself. And then I'm going to use some pearls. So let's go ahead and get started with the masking or stenciling. So I'm just going to start off the side here, and we're just going to be doing a tone on tone, and I'm just going to come in here and start rubbing this color in over this mask or stencil. And I chose this color because I love the ocean, and so this just kind of reminds me of kind of a soothing, especially with the sayings on the stamp set. This is kind of, to me, a soothing color. And I'm more concerned about making sure I get good ink coverage around the edges than the center, because we're going to be covering that up. So if we're a little bit light in the center, that's okay. take a peek and see what that looks like. I think that looks good. So there's our stenciled piece. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this 4 1/4 piece by 3, and we're going to rough up the edges. This is just going to kind of give it a little bit of dimension. So you can just take the edge of your scissors. If you have a sanding block, you can do that with a sanding block too. But just take the edge of your scissors and just kind of be careful, but rough up the edge. Okay, so we've got that edge roughed up. And then because I want to make it kind of stand out just a little bit, I'm going to use my sponge dauber here and take some of this Coastal Cabana. I always get ink on my fingers. Take some of this Coastal Cabana, and I'm just going to kind of ink the edges. And you don't have to rough up the edges on this if you don't want to. You can totally leave it just as it is. Okay, so I've inked the edges on that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our DSP strips and place them, glue them in place in kind of a, not really a patterned way, just kind of a wonky way. So add a little bit of glue on there, and just does not need to be straight. Okay. They don't even have to be lined up. You can have them, you know, up and down, not matching. And I'm okay with the rough edges on these because it is kind of, we roughed up the edges on this card. Okay, so there we have this piece. Now we're going to go ahead and set that aside for now, and we're going to take care of our greeting. So I'm going to go ahead and print and stamp this greeting in the Coastal Cabana and get that stamped on our piece here. There we go. And then for the cross, I also I'm going to stamp it on the cardstock in the Coastal Cabana. Then I'm going to fussy cut it. And you can just take your scissors and just go around. Turn the paper while you're cutting, not the scissors. And you can bubble around it to get as close. I do like to bubble around, but I tend to get really close. So you'll just fussy cut around that, and I won't have you watch me do the whole process. I've already done that ahead of time. Okay, so now we can get to finishing our card. So what I did is I have a bunch of scraps. I wanted to lift this up, but I didn't want it really, really high. So I do have several scraps, and so I decided I would utilize those. And that's how we're going to lift that up. I'm going to do think I'm going to do 3 high, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue these down and on top of each other so I can get some of this height. And you can do this in lieu. We know we all have scraps all the time. This is a good way, especially if you do not have dimensionals, this is a good way to get the height that you want. And not have it as high, because the dimensionals would be a little bit higher than this, but not have it as high if you don't want it to be that high. Okay, now that we have that in place, we're going to go ahead and put that in the center of our card. Okay. Now for the sentiment, I did the same thing. I took my scraps and I just put a couple of them on there to give it some dimension. But I'm also, just so it stands out a little bit for this one, I'm going to take my dauber, and it still has some of the Coastal Cabana ink, so I'm just going to go around the edge and just ink the edge up. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and cut that down just a little bit more. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and mount this on this centerpiece here. Okay, so that's on. So now the next thing I'm going to do, since I'm using the cross and fussy cutting that out, I'm actually going to use a couple of mini dimensionals to attach that to the card. Let's see if I can take that off. I did not want that there. Yep, there we go. And then one more right about there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and take these backing papers off these dimensionals. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of center it with a little bit of the cross kind of going over the sentiment. There we go. Now to finish this off on this one, I have some other samples to show you. I'm going to go ahead and use, these are the basic pearls. And I'm going to go ahead and use this to just add a little bit of embellishment here. Down there. One kind of right there. That looks good. And then for the inside piece, we're going to go ahead and take the cross and just stamp it in the corner. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and add that to the inside. Okay, and there we have our finished card. I think it turned out really, really pretty, and I love the Coastal Cabana color with this design. So some of the other things that I've done a little bit differently is I did the cross also with the cream, or I mean, sorry, the Very Vanilla, and I stamped it on Very Vanilla and fussy cut that out as well. I also wanted to see what it would look like in black and white. So there is that as well. And I did use some different stencils on these cards. And then here are some samples with the other stamps. I just fussy cut out the bird, and I fussy cut out the sentiment. And then for this one here, I thought it would be just cool just to add that stamped image above that, I thank God every time I think of you, and then fussy cut out that as well. I added a few more embellishments on here because I didn't have an image for the card. And then here's the final one, Hope Anchors the Soul. Thank you for joining me in my craft room, and I hope you craft along and make some of these cards, and I'll see you on the next one.